Hi, I'm Nussbaumer from Macrobeat.co.uk. Well, another week, another dollar, as I say, but we will come to that a little bit later on. For the moment, I just want to quickly dig into the sort of other events of the week. In terms of volatility, it wasn't really the biggest week, but there's a few key elements that are shifting the ground a little bit. Obviously, we have the US and China trade talks that are still in the making, and things start to look up a little bit. But then obviously we have the newest story, which is that the Democrats in the US are launching, or possibly launching, a impeachment process against the President Trump, which we kind of know from the way this process works, it's probably a very limited chance of success. But nevertheless, it does really lead to some uncertainty in the market. The story will probably linger around for some time to come. But I think more importantly for me, it would mean that the Democrats run a strategy where they probably try to chip on the edges of Trump's support, because Trump doesn't really look that great in the national polls versus Biden. It will do nothing to his core supporters. They probably rally around him even more strongly, but it's about these sort of supporters in the wings. So what my thinking was that we have the trade talks confirmed now for October 10 and October 11. And I start to think that Mr. Trump might actually start to need results for his election campaign. It might not be good enough anymore just to talk about what he's about to do. I think he needs some real results. And so for me, against the odds of maybe, a majority of the market, I actually start to think there is a chance for a trade deal between the US and China. Trump may have to ditch some of his expectations or demands to actually come to some sort of a compromise with the Chinese. So the odds for a trade deal, in my opinion, have gone up. But what I want to look at on the first slide is quickly have a look at what we had in terms of US data this week. We had the second quarter GDP. Obviously, I'm well aware that this is usually rear view mirror stuff and maybe less important, but with a print at 2%, with the Q1 well above 3%. So we are still on course of definitely a 2019 GDP around 2%. So the US data, surprisingly, is still not yet rolling over. On the next slide, we see pending home sales. This has really been a drag in the last sort of few years. And what we see is even they start to recover. So while we wait for the US data to roll over on the back of the global weakness in growth, the US data surprisingly are still sort of holding up. And that's probably where the difficulty is for the Fed to maneuver policy between the sort of global risk versus the domestic economy still sort of hanging. We know the manufacturers are in trouble, but that is really only about 11% of GDP. The rest still seems to be sort of being all right. On the next slide, we have the euro dollar, which is obviously the big part of the DXY as well. We did finally break the year's low yesterday, and we keep on pressing on with the next really big key level at 108.60. The dollar has been going sort of more or less sideways for most of the year, but now it seems, as we've been waiting for the US economy to roll over and it just hasn't happened yet, it just seems the dollar now starts to realize that the US is still okay, the carry is still okay. What we have as well, and we shouldn't overestimate this move just now, is the sort of quarter-end rebalancing, which is seeing a lot of dollar buying. So the real judge on the dollar will be first week of October. On the next slide, we have gold. Gold obviously is losing some of the drivers of being negative around trade, seeing more easing from central banks, the dollar being weak. Now we suddenly have a more friendly trade talks. We have the Fed possibly not easing. We have a strong dollar rally. So suddenly all the drivers for the gold on the upside is kind of disappearing. And I would think we're going to see a very severe test of this 1485 level at some point next week. This is it for me, Nussbaumer, Macrobeat.co.uk. Thank you very much.